So once again, my family was forced into exile, and this time crossing the Atlantic and sailing past the Statue of Liberty to new and welcoming home. And one of the things that my father used to say all the time was that it was very nice to be in England during the war, and people were very kind, and they would say, you know, we're sorry your country's been taken over by a terrible dictator. What can we do to help you? You're welcome here, and when are you going home? And when we came to the United States, people would say, well, we're sorry your country's been taken over by a terrible system. You're welcome here. What can we do to help you, and when will you become a citizen? And he always said that for him was what made America what it was. We moved to Colorado after we came to the United States, and my father became a professor at the University of Denver. And as a student, there was nothing I yearned for more than to be an average American teenager. But because of my background, I also had a very deep interest in international affairs. And in fact, whenever I went to a new school, I started an international relations club, and I made myself president. Of course, back then, I never imagined that I might one day become Secretary of State. And it's not that I lacked ambition, it's just that I'd never seen a Secretary of State in a skirt. And I'll never forget actually walking down, Ed, you know, the 7th floor hall, and walking into my office for the first time. And to get there, I had to go down this hall that had portraits of all the former Secretaries of State. And they were all white men who only differed from each other as to whether they had beards or mustaches or were clean shaven. And I thought, well, maybe when my portrait went up, the walls would shake a bit. It did go up in April. It was a little. And yesterday I actually was at the department, and I was asked a question as to whether we'd ever see a male Secretary of State again. So we'll see. It's very important when barriers come down, because that is when history is made. And I had the feeling then, and we all have that feeling now. Because a month ago, the American voter sent a message that truly is being heard around the world. Even many of those who voted for John McCain have recognized the landmark nature of Barack Obama's election. His elevation to the presidency is a stunning setback to the enemies of the United States. The image their propaganda has painted of an arrogant and imperial America does not fit well with Barack Obama's face or voice. But while our enemies may be worried, friends are indeed hopeful. And they expect, as I do, that the new administration will return to the mainstream traditions of U.S. foreign policy and work cooperatively with others in a bipartisan way to address global problems. And that's a good thing, because the list of such problems is very long. Every president inherits headaches. President Obama will inherit the entire emergency room. Challenges include the global economic crisis, wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, international terrorism, nuclear proliferation, climate change, and a widening split between the rich and the poor. And as if that were not enough, the new administration will take office with a depleted treasury, an overextended military, and a deeply divided world community. We know that in January, President Obama will begin work eager to make his mark. But as he warned on election night, he and we must also be very patient. We cannot expect to recover all the ground we have lost in the first 100 or even in the first 1,000 days of a new administration. It will take time to reclaim America's reputation as a champion of human rights and international law, to restore trust in America's economic judgment, and to renew faith in the principles of free enterprise and fair competition. And it will take time, but the opportunity is definitely there. In a world that lacks direction, there can be no doubt that a pathfinder is needed. And that role is unlikely to be filled by those who now challenge democratic values, by radical populists, aggressive nationalists, boastful autocrats, or the apostles of a holy war. It is much more likely to be found in the values that reside at the heart of the Gülen Institute and this Luncheon series. These values include a commitment to international dialogue, an understanding of cultural diversity, support for human justice, and the love of peace. And that's a pretty good platform for bringing the world together. And it's an excellent reflection of America at its best. And it's the perfect starting point for a discussion of global affairs as we await the inauguration of the 44th President of the United States. Thank you all very much.
The first one, her autobiography, Madam Secretary, a memoir, was published in 2003. In 2006, Dr. Albright published The Mighty and the Almighty, Reflections on America, God, and World Affairs. And now her latest book, Memo to the President, How We Can Restore America's Reputation and Leadership, is published this year, and I guess it's available for all of you fine folks.
Definitely.
This is not Oprah, so we don't have books for all of you today, but trust me, it's a good read if you can get your hands on it. First of all,
I have to tell you, I inscribed it to, at that stage, Senator Obama, and I wrote in it with the audacity to hope that this book will be useful to you.
I'm sure it will. Let's start, I guess, so that we can put things in perspective with your time in office as Secretary of State. You mentioned up there in a sort of humorous tone that you really didn't expect to be Secretary of State because you hadn't seen Secretary of State in skirts. But at some point in your career, it became clear to you, I guess, that it was a position that you could aspire to and that you might likely be appointed to.
Well, you'd be surprised about this. I actually didn't expect it to happen until it happened. What happened, and it fits in very well, I think, at the moment with, there probably is not this sense of hysteria in Houston that there is in Washington at this moment of the transition where people are wondering who they're going to be. Mm-hmm. And I was ambassador to the United Nations at the time, and my name had kind of come up, but I also, the speculation in the press went back and forth, and people said that a woman could not be Secretary of State. And then somebody at the White House actually said, well, Madeleine Albright's name is on the list, but she's second tier, which kind of irritated a few people. Anyway, I then, because I had a great job, I was a cabinet member and a member of the Principals Committee, and this is actually what happened. In December 4th, I am in New York in my office, and Erskine Bowles, who was chief of staff at the time, called me up and he said, if you were tomorrow to get a phone call from the President of the United States, would you take the call? And if he were to ask you to be Secretary of State, would you say yes? And I thought, are they out of their minds? Who would say no to these questions?
You got to be sure.
Got it, right. So he said, well, so Erskine said, so go home, go to Washington, and the President will call you. So I get on the plane, I go home, I get up first thing in the morning, and forgetting with whom I'm dealing, that President Clinton was up real late at night and didn't get up real early. And I was afraid to take a shower, so I sat there in my pink bathrobe waiting for this phone to ring. And I kept saying, he's changed his mind, changed his mind. So around 9:30, the phone call happens, and what happened was the White House operator said, hold for the President of the United States, and then they put some horrible music on. And then I kept thinking, he's changed his mind, he's changed his mind. And then he said, will you be my Secretary of State, and came on. So I didn't expect it.
Was there a pregnant pause as you
No, I said, I practically jumped through the phone. And I said I would be really honored, and so that's how it all began. But I honestly did not think it was going to happen, partially because of the woman thing. And I do think my daughters are entitled to say this. They said, Mom, you know, now there have been 2 other women, and nobody has asked whether a woman could be Secretary of State, and you did that. And so I'm very proud of that, and very proud of Hillary Clinton.
In the limited time that we have, give us a sense of what was the best thing you found about the job, your greatest memories, your greatest recollections.